Mayor Denner, the public is in.
Okay, thank you, Leah. I call this meeting to order. This is a special meeting of the City Council for the City of Grosse Pointe Park. Clerk Blayhut, please call the roll.
Councilmember Rayland,
Present.
Reed,
Here.
McConnell,
Here.
Robson,
Here.
Hodges,
Here.
Fluid,
Here.
and Mayor Denner.
Here. Thank you. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we get started here, a couple of comments and housekeeping things. First, so most everybody knows, I'm not sure if the public that joined might know that the Recreation Commission meeting last night was Zoom bombed. It was very unfortunate, inappropriate, and embarrassing. The administration quickly worked to fix that situation, but we did have to restart the meeting. Administration is hopefully prepared for that. Hopefully we won't have that happen to us tonight, but it was most disturbing. This is a special meeting for a budget workshop. The administration has worked very hard on the budget. I'd like to thank Finance Director Blayhut and actually the whole team for contributing to putting this together. It's a huge amount of work. It really takes several months to get us to this workshop by leadership across all the city departments, as well as the city manager and the finance director. So I want to thank you on that. This is a meeting. It's called a workshop. What we're doing tonight is we're discussing. We're having the budget presented to us, at least the highlights. We're discussing it as a council to make sure that we understand it. We're asking questions and identifying those areas that we might want to be amended. There will be no vote on that this evening. The vote for the budget is on Monday at our regular council meeting. We will have a budget hearing in conformance with state law. And at that time, it is our responsibility to adopt a budget. We'll start with this one as presented, and we can adopt the budget as presented, or we can amend it. As we did last year, we had a few amendments to the budget before we were done. So that's what we're up to tonight. First item on the agenda is public comment. So I'm going to turn it over to the administration for public comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Denner. So we have no written public comments tonight, but I'll ask Leah Smith if we have any spoken public comments.
Thank you, City Manager Seisland. I have no public comment at this time.
Okay, well, so that closes public comment section. We'll get on with the workshop. I'm going to ask the city manager to lead the presentation to walk us through the highlights of the budget. I think he's going to do that section by section, and we'll pause periodically in that presentation to ask questions, discuss, make sure that we're clear on what's there and any concerns that we may have. So City Manager Seisland, you want to take it away?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Denner and members of the City Council. Good to see you tonight in the public. Thank you for joining us tonight. What I'm going to do first is going to go over a brief history of our budget right now that was prepared by Clerk Blayhut, preparing a couple of highlights. My apologies if you see me have to drink some water at times because there's quite a bit for me to discuss tonight, but I think we're going to have a great workshop, so I look forward to it. All local governments are required to prepare and administer an annual balanced budget. How well the city has performed in administering the budget is then reviewed by at the end of the fiscal year by an independent auditor. As a result of the 2008 recession and restriction in state law and revenue growth, city fund reserves fell. Property tax revenues have now recovered and surpassed the pre-recession levels. However, between that time, the city lost hundreds of thousands in revenue. The city has adapted to meeting service demands of residents with a reduced staff and will continue to evaluate how we can service the residents. The added challenge for the past year has been the issues related to COVID-19. Grosse Pointe Park was fortunate and applied for and received grants in this fiscal year totaling an amount of $464,249. I'd like to specifically thank Ms. Leah Smith for all of her help in the Public Safety Department and Clerk Blayhut. Everyone really pulled together to help with those resources, so hats off to all of them. The MERS pension annual required payments will increase significantly due to changed demographics of how MERS works on those. To achieve a balanced budget in future years, the current staff levels may need to be reduced through attrition to accommodate the annual required contribution. As you'll see later, our required payment is growing over the next couple of years. Good news, the city will receive approximately $1.1 million from the American Rescue Plan Act signed by President Biden. The regulations on spending these funds have not yet been established. However, it is assumed to be water, sewer, and infrastructure, along with economic assistance. These dollars will be distributed in two parts and will expire on December 31st, 2024. The city's budget has two main components, the general fund and non-general funds. In order to fully understand how the city finances projects and programs, it's important to understand the difference. What I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight in this current fiscal year right now, non-reoccurring COVID-related impact that we saw in this year's budget. Recreation charges, we lost approximately $59,000 over Parks and Recreation for programs. Membership fees, approximately $156,000. Theater ticket sales, approximately $57,000. Concession of $31,000. Court fines, $20,000, parking violations, $50,000, ordinance fines and costs, $88,000. The recreation building rentals is the Tompkins Center, about $54,000. And however, in the good news, as I highlighted, we did receive multiple grants and rebates, $431,000. As you'll see below, the reoccurring impact, and as I highlighted about pension costs, for this upcoming 21-22 fiscal year, we're expected to spend about $2.2 million. And as you'll see, all the way to fiscal year 26-27, it's going to go up to almost $2.8 million. Now to discuss the general fund. The taxpayer dollars are deposited in the general fund along with state shared revenue from sales and use taxes, franchise fees, and business licensing fees. General fund dollars are used to support said city services as public safety, public works, and the parks, as well as community development and administrative support services. Special revenue funds consist of major and local street funds, roads, rubbish, building, indigent fund, drug forfeiture, and the CDBG or Community Development Block Grant Fund. Component funds are the DDA and TIFA. These funds are generated through a tax capture and is spent within the area of the tax jurisdiction. Enterprise funds consist of the marina and the water and sewer. Revenues are generated for the services provided, marina boat slip rentals, and water and sewer services that provide to each home and business. Debt retirement funds has its own dedicated fund for the repayment of debt. Under tax collections of general fund, our 2021 taxable values rose to $671 million. That represented about a 3.6% from the prior year. However, because of this value risen.
You misstated the number, 6 million.
Oh, I apologize there. I was going a little too fast. This value rose higher than the rate of inflation, which requires the rates to be rolled back, and that'll be about 1.4%.
I'm sorry, it was my mistake. I apologize. You were correct.
Thank you.
Please continue.
Thank you. All right. So in regards to below, you'll see that the tax rates from 2020, 2021, how those rates were rolled back due to Headley. Health insurance and pension costs are the most significant fringe benefit costs. To reduce these, the following measures were taken below within the pension. To further reduce costs and increase funding level, a surplus account was established to deposit extra payments over and above the city's annual ARC payment to the overall underfunded liability. Note the MERS utilized new tables were adopted in 2020, which requires members to contribute a higher payment to achieve the funding level sooner. Grosse Pointe Park will reach that target funding level of 60% in 2027. For OPEB, retiree health care. In January 2020, the City Council approved the implementation of Trust 115 to set aside funds to fund the unfunded healthcare liability. Previously, the city has always maintained a pay-as-you-go program. Gabriel Roeder Smith, who does a retirement consulting actuarial firm, provide an actuarial whereby the liability was reduced from 30 million to 18 as a result of this Trust 115. Each year, $60,000 will be budgeted deposited within the trust to reach the required funding level of state requirements. And as you'll see below, measures taken to reduce the unfunded healthcare liability through contract negotiations. Major and local street funds. Major and local street funds, Act 51 funding had been budgeted according to state guidelines. The road millage capture for 21-22 is estimated to be approximately $650,000. Of those funds, $174,000 will be transferred to the major street fund and $475,000 to the local street fund. The rubbish fund. The current rubbish contract negotiated with GFLs for a 5-year term, rates increasing at 2.25% per year. Recycling rates have been increased from $226,000 to $244,000. The cost per homeowner per 2-month water billing cycle will be required to increase from the current rate of $871 to $995. And that will come later before City Council as we look to either extend with Green for Life or go out to bid for recycling services. The Grosse Pointe, or CDA, is the Grosse Pointe Clinton Refuse Authority. That's Grosse Pointe Woods, Grosse Pointe Park, Harper Woods, and Grosse Pointe Shores. We are currently at $34.78 per ton with an estimated tonnage of 5,818, representing an annual premium of $210,000. This line item for rubbish disposal also includes leaf composting for $60,000 in the fall. The rubbish millage is at its Headley cap of 1.58 per $1,000 of value. The building department represents all building inspections, permit management, plan review, and consulting services. And we previously highlighted the DDA and TIFA, which represents the residential and commercial properties of those areas. 2007 bond account. The principal and interest payment for the bond payment is about $638,000. This note will be paid off in fiscal year 2027. Principal and interest and paid in the past fiscal year was $656,000 and $593,000 was budgeted. The difference will come out of the accumulated reserves from prior year's fund balance. The road millage that was passed by voters a couple of years ago for 1 mil is at approximately 0.96, and that'll be about $650,000 in tax capture. And this millage will set to expire in 2028. And this is for alleys, parking lots, and streets within Grosse Pointe Park. The construction loan of 2019 was for City Hall renovations. The principal and interest payment for that loan is $161,000, and this note will be paid off in the year 2040. The TIFA construction loan, the principal and interest payments for that DPW is charged to the TIFA fund. The first charge will actually be in October of this coming year, and the note will be paid off in 2036. The capital improvement fund includes acquisitions by all departments. Water and sewer. Grosse Pointe Park entered an agreement of GLWA that goes into effect July 1st, 2021, and was approved by City Council just a short while ago. By entering, and that should actually be a 30-year agreement, not 20. The water flat rate and flow rates have been reduced, resulting in savings of $157,000. However, sewer rates have been increased by $82,000 annually, so we'll have a net savings of about $74,000. The administration recommends maintaining the rates that are currently in place, and we have held those rates for the last 2 years. The last sewer rate increase, was in 2016, and the last water rate was 2019. And finally, for the marina, the projected budget represents about $307,000, representing a 5% increase over the prior year. And this is year 2 of a 5% increase. And we've done a 3-year program for those 5% increases. So moving on next, I'm going to go in a little bit into the general fund. What I'd like to do is I'm going to highlight a couple key components in here that I think it's important for council to look over. And what I'll do at the very end when I'm complete, I'll ask if there's any questions, and we'll go from there. So give me 1 second. Thank you, and we'll take it away. So the fund balance right now for the city of Grosse Pointe Park is at about 28%. The state likes to have it at about 12%, so far we're doing quite well. However, approximately after this budget will be reduced down to 22%, so we're still above that 12% mark. Current property taxes went up about 1.4%. The operational millage for public safety, which is now at 259, we're at about 1.7 million there. Sales and use tax, which is state shared revenue, went up from 1 million in 2021 to about 1.2 for this requested budget. And we're looking at about an $800,000 in surplus appropriation for the general fund. Regarding, well, let me stop there. Any questions about that first? Councilmember Reed?
Yeah, just a question, and I think I do know the answer to this on our fund balance. As a council, and I don't recall ever doing it, we have not set a policy in terms of a, other than trying to adhere to what the state recommends. We don't have an internal policy on our desired fund balance percentage. Is that correct?
I believe that is correct, yes.
Okay, so is that something that, I mean, I would like to, I think that's, it's recommended in the training that I've done through MML for council to set that policy. So that's just something going forward. I think we need to, as a policy matter, decide what level of fund balance we're comfortable with. And that's probably an ongoing policy decision is, with each council.
Mm-hmm.
I'll
Mayor Denner?
comment a little bit on that question while we're at it. A little bit of history, and I asked. I know that the city administration is familiar with this. We have right now the highest fund balance as a percentage that we've ever had as a city. We're at 28%. We bottomed out actually in 2009 at 2.5%. It was a very scary time for the city after the recession. And through careful fiscal management, renegotiation of contracts, some austerity measures, we slowly but surely were able to build it back up. Our auditors used to give us a 10 to 15% target range for fund balance. And as a council, historically, we thought that if we could achieve a stable roughly 15%. I know the state's minimum target for us is 12. We felt in the past we have felt comfortable. We have never had, to my knowledge, a formal policy to that effect. But I just wanted to share some of those previous discussions with council.
Just to add to my comment, two things, and thank you for that historical perspective. I'm just looking for one council policy for our desired fund balance, and also a policy in terms of when we would dip into fund balance. Those are guidelines recommended for municipal finance, and I don't think we've ever had it. So I think it's a good idea to set that policy. Obviously, economics sometimes dictates what that is. Right now, we're in a good position. Depending on the economy, that will certainly affect it. But I think going forward, we should be setting that policy so we have that guideline.
Makes sense.
Any other questions before I move on to a couple of the departments? Councilmember Fluid?
This is a very small expense, but I just wanted to ask about the dog license because we're looking at, hopefully $2,800. I was just noticing that hopefully, ideally, dog licenses are going to increase in price from the $10 a year, which is what they are right now, to an amount that will actually cover the expenses at the dog park. And I don't think, a $30 a year dog license fee is unreasonable, especially if it's going to give access to the dog park. So, it's a very small amount of money, but I would actually like to see that increase so that it does cover those costs.
One thing I can comment with that, Councilmember Fluid, and thank you for that question, is something that was brought up actually is, Recreation Commission approved its application yesterday in dog park rules, and as part of that process, residents will be required to have that dog license. So if we were to go at approximately, let's say we have about 200 dog licenses, just for numbers purposes, we would estimate that would be about $4,000 just regarding those for dog licenses, and then an additional $8,000 to $12,000, which we use based upon Grosse Pointe Farms dog application. So we'll certainly be able to cover those costs, but that's something you'll definitely see within this next budget, that number will definitely increase.
Are we looking at, I know initially it was maybe $50 a year. The last time I saw, I think it was $40 a year. Has that been determined?
It hasn't been determined yet. It's going to be based upon when the dog park opens. So obviously, if that's opening either the late May or June, we want to make sure that we're not charging, $50 for the rest of the year. So maybe we actually would go down to $40 or $35 for the first year, and then we'll, roll it back up to $50 maybe starting in January.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone. So Council and Department 101, just to note, consulting fees, the council approved $50,000, which was used for MKSK, which is our master plan consultant. And I would like to budget for $50,000 this year for additional consulting fees. One of those areas that I think the city could really utilize is plan review service from a professional planner, whether that be an OHM, McKenna, or other companies that are out there. So just wanted to note that for you. And code recodification. This is something that the Ordinance Review Committee has brought up several times. It's something that I certainly, and I know City Clerk Blayhut would love to have. So we have approximately budgeted about $13,000 within that item. Any questions regarding that? Okay, seeing none. I'm going to go on to court. And so for the court, not too much change there. We were at $335,000 for 2021, and now we're at $342,000. So not too much of a change. Department 1, oh, go right ahead.
So across the board in several departments, there's some in council, there's some in your office, public service, clerk, public safety, recreation. There's a lot of dues and subscriptions. And I was just wondering if you could speak to that. I tallied it up. It looks like it's just, about over $16,000 for dues and subscriptions. So just curious what those are for, and if there's an opportunity to play.
Yeah, no problem. So, across the board, I'll start with myself. So, there is the Michigan Municipal Executives, there's the ICMA, those are some dues and subscriptions, as part of the city manager. For the clerk, there's clerk organizations. For the court, there's also court organizations for those dues and subscriptions. In regards to public works, there's actually Michigan Rural Water, Michigan Public Works Association, and a couple others through public safety, where those dues and subscriptions, that's what that's for.
Okay, I just raise it as, I don't know how long we have to function, but I guess as a business person, dues and subscriptions is a line item that I look at when I'm trying to find ways to save money. So I just want to put that out there.
Thank you. So for the city manager, that's myself. Not too much change there. It was 185 last year for this fiscal year, and then about 184 for this year. Department 173, public service. So this would be for here at the front of City Hall. One thing to note, due to COVID-19 and increase in cost, Our contractual services janitor for City Hall increased to about 49,000 from 37 due to toilet paper and other supplies that are in short right now. And then other thing of note is the insurance and bonds, which is at the bottom of the public service. We were at about 65,000 this year, and now we've increased to about 90,500. And that's due to the lawsuit back in 2016. And so any questions regarding the city manager or public service? Seeing none, I will go ahead to elections and financial administration. So for elections, we were looking at about 122 for last year, and this year 129 for increases. Financial administration, we have approximately the, well, one thing I'll note is legal services. That's for Mr. Hollett and Bodman's firm. And then GASB OPEB actuarial. You will note that this fiscal year was about $8,000, and this year it's increased to about $26,700. And that's because every other year that required GASB actuarials, they have more reporting, and so that's why you see that increase in cost there. Any questions regarding those two? I see one hand.
So I just want to get clarity on legal, because I think like there's legal in the council budget, but then there's also legal in the financial budget. So is it counted twice, or because I got to 150,000? I don't know if that's accurate.
No, you are correct. So if we were to break that out, Councilmember McConnell, the retainer for Bodman's about $70,000. There's $30,000 for additional payments to Bodman, and then there's $50,000 for prosecution. So totaling 150. Oh, Councilmember Fluid.
So another relatively small line item, but down at the bottom, $12,000 for bank. I'm assuming those are, the annual fees that the bank is charging. I just wanted to ask about that because I know the PTO that I serve on was having kind of the same issue, and it was just an exorbitant amount of bank fees. And they did, I don't know what kind of magic they worked, but they did get those bank fees knocked down. And I wonder if we've tried that, or if we could make an effort to bring those down from $12,000 a year.
So one thing that we've looked to do, and actually this was from Finance Director Blayhut, but we're looking at, bank fees and interest, they are lower right now. We moved to a 0% interest bearing account. And so if there's anything, we'd look to hopefully reduce that cost. Jane, is there any other regarding that item?
I'll clarify that a little bit. We had an interest-bearing account, and last year we collected about $36,000 in interest. However, the bank fees, they took the bank fees out of our interest account. So really, we would have earned about $48,000 interest. Because of COVID, the rates went down drastically, so we didn't have the interest account to pay for the finance charges. So that's why so I'll have to do a budget amendment at year end. That's why we spent $13,000 in the year end, because once COVID hit, we weren't collecting the interest that we normally were. So we went to a 0% interest bearing account, and the fees should be reduced greatly. I budgeted $12,000 just to make sure that we have sufficient monies in there, but I'm hopeful that it'll be a lot less than that.
Thanks, Jane.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jane.
Sure.
So I'm going to move on to Department 215 and 300, which is City Clerk and Public Safety. You will note that the original budget for 2021 was about $183,000, and now there's a slight increase to about $195,000. And then Public Safety. Before I get into a couple of the items here, one thing I do want to note to the council and public is in this fiscal year, we had 2 retirements within Public Safety. We had three new hires of PSO officers, and in this upcoming fiscal year in 21-22, we're going to have about 2 retirements. So as you can see within the public safety budget, They account for about 3.7 on this requested budget, 3.7 million. The fringe benefit costs are about 3.3 million. Other things of note that are new to the system, if you go to the very bottom, are the Smart 911. There is an unexpected increase for the Smart 911 fees. Electronic hospital reporting is also a new payment for public safety. The Smart Cone, our year subscription for free is expired. Those are the Smart Cone over at St. Paul and over in Kercheval, right near the schools. And for $4,500, the 911 voice logger recorder. And so, any more questions regarding the city clerk or public safety? Councilmember Robson first, then McConnell.
Thank you, City Manager. I'm looking at the appropriation for uniforms. Current year is 65,000, or spent was 23,000, and the appropriation is 66,625. You may not know this. You might have to consult with the chiefs, but I'm wondering if we could slash $20,000 from that appropriation, given what we spent this year and in the past. There may be a necessity to spend that amount of money. I just don't know, but it seems if we're looking to slash somewhere, my suggestion is the possibility of slashing by 20,000, pending the opinion of the chief of or the director of public safety. If you could discuss that with them or whatever you want.
No, that's a great recommendation. I can do that.
Thank you.
Councilmember McConnell.
Can you just elaborate a little bit more on the voice logger? Is that's something new that we have, and what were we utilizing before?
That's over at our dispatch. From my understanding, that's a new piece of equipment that's required over at dispatch. And so that'll be for the next couple of years, you'll see that payment.
Thanks.
Vikas and then Ame.
Nick, the voice logger, is that the intermunicipal radio? Is that the same thing? Or is that something different?
Oh, no, those two are different.
Okay, so I just see a big jump in the intermunicipal radio. I don't think you mentioned that.
Yeah, let me go ahead and clarify. Oh,
Go ahead. No, please go ahead.
So the intermunicipal radio is interesting. This is something that the Grosse Pointe public safety departments have been a part of since approximately the 1960s. They've all worked together. The Grosse Pointe Farms actually has a radio tower over at its public safety department, and each Grosse Pointe pulls in its resources so that they have talk channels just for themselves among the Grosse Pointes. And so we had originally budgeted about $12,000 within that. However, Grosse Pointe Farms, who administers this program, talked to each community and said that we have about these extra increases. So as you can see, we had about 70,000 in increases with the intermunicipal radio. Through negotiations of the city managers, we were all talking of how we could reduce those costs and see if we could contract out services. Grosse Pointe Farms had expressed that they would certainly look to do so. However, we were looking at for the 21-22 requested budget. Unfortunately, it looks like those costs are going up. And so one of the things that I would like to do, and along with several of my colleagues in the other Grosse Pointes, is we'd like to see if there's a potential that we could pull out of this radio system. This is quite a significant cost. The state, from my understanding, can house our radios, which would be at an extreme reduced rate. And so one of the first tasks I'll have of Mr. Brian Jarrell is work with the state to see if that is a potential that we could pull out of that system and go over to the state, hopefully at a reduced cost.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. And then just one more thing on the smartphone. If they're going to charge us, we working, because I know the smartphone in Somerset hasn't worked for some months now. If it is working, I've never seen it work. So that I'll talk offline about just to see if we can improve that. So thank you.
I do know on one of them. Oh, sorry. I do know on one of them there were some bugs. I think that's the St. Paul location. So
Yeah,
certainly I think it's been yeah. You and I were talking about that. So that's one that if I can try and get a reduced cost, because that was couple months that we actually have had some trouble regarding that system. Otherwise, the Kirchhoff one is working quite well.
Good, good. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Okay, Councilmember Hodges and then Councilmember Fluid.
Just a quick suggestion, City Manager Seisland, regarding the intermunicipal radio fee. I'm wondering if it would put you in a stronger management position if those dollars weren't, or negotiating position, I should say, if those dollars weren't allocated, and requiring you to bring it back to council at such time that the City of Grosse Pointe Farms makes its case, and we can consider it separately and give it some due diligence at that time. And then you would have the power to be able to say, I don't have those dollars allocated. You know, I need to make the case to my council, and then we could entertain it at that time. So again, it's more of a strategy position that I'm suggesting you might want to consider, and that we could support you in that regard, where if we did not approve it tonight, you would have to come back to us. And I think that that would impress upon our partners the need to really solidly make that case. So it's, again, just a management suggestion that I would make for us all to consider. And I don't think the dollars would still be there if you need them. They're not at risk of being allocated elsewhere because they're coming from fund balance anyway. You would still have the capacity to secure those dollars if need be, but you'd be in a stronger position.
No, I certainly think that's a discussion, and that could be helped and used when leverage, because I do believe that this is something that we have been working through as the city managers, and sometimes a little push might be more needed. So, absolutely. Councilmember Fluid.
Thanks. Okay, so if you look, it's the 5th line down, fringe benefits on public safety. And this is actually, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit because I'm assuming these things are all related to each other. Fringe benefits, we had allocated a little over 3 million. It dropped considerably. I'm assuming COVID had something to do with that, to 62,000. And then we went back up to 3.3 million requested for this next fiscal year. Now, if you look on the next page, we have kind of a similar scenario. It's not quite as dramatic, but fringe benefits for recreation does the same kind of thing. It starts off at 129,000, it drops to 14, and then next year, or this coming year, it goes back up to 136. And then the page after that, Social Security tax, we had allocated 300,000 this year, went down to 0, and then it goes back up to 300,000 for next year. So my question is, I'm assuming that's COVID related. I'm assuming all those things are kind of for the same reason, but I want to ensure that what we actually spent this fiscal year, because these are Social Security and fringe benefits for our employees, that we're not taking our COVID financial issues out on what our employees are expecting from the city. So can you kind of explain how those numbers rose and fell? I see Jane getting ready to talk there.
Who would have a
I can answer that question for you, Ami.
Yeah.
If you go to the very last page in the general fund, it will show you go to page 5, and it will show you the fringe benefits, 101,850 appropriations. It has health insurance, life insurance, worker comp. If you see the very first column, like we budgeted $1,832,000, we've spent $1,342,000 so far. We will use all of our fringe benefit costs. How that works at the end of the year, because we're self-funded for healthcare, we don't know what some of these other costs are going to go up or down. I wait until I get all the fringe benefits numbers in, and then I distribute them to all the fringe accounts, including all the other funds. So that number won't be adjusted until year end after June 30th.
Okay.
Does
That's
that make
an
sense?
easy explanation. Yes, it does.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I got a one slight adjustment here because my microphone's about to die. So 1 second. Okay, so my next thing, we'll move on to, I don't think there's any other questions. I'll move on to Public Works, and I'll move on to tree maintenance. Within the Public Works Department, Department 441, you'll note that the cost in 2021 was for $55,000, and that has been reduced to $30,000 due to only having one part-time worker. However, we have increased our amount of full-time workers at Public Works. In regards to tree maintenance, Brian Coulter is our city forester. He goes a day and a half over to Grosse Pointe City, and they share some of those costs of Brian of his salaries and fringe benefits. One thing I do want to note too is within the landscaping of the tree trimming and tree removal, we have had to use it. We are going to have to use a new contractor for those, and so that's why you'll see those changes there. Otherwise, on both those regarding Public Works and tree maintenance, there's not too much of a difference there. Any questions regarding those? Councilmember McConnell.
The only question I had is the allocation for parking meter repairs. I know that I believe it was Tifa that had some discussion about doing some work with parking meters. So I'm just curious if there's any opportunity for either additional help or if that's something that could shift to Tifa or DDA.
We do actually have some repairs over within the Public Works, actually 4 meters. However, this is something that I definitely wanted to look at, within the Tifa budget. There is quite a bit in that area that needs some serious help. We have our Public Works guys are very, very talented. They have fixed them over the years, but there's some that are just beyond their time. And so it's time to upgrade those. But certainly if we can shift a little more, I'll take a look into that. Let me write this down real quick. Thank you. All right, so moving, did I hear something? Okay.
I was just saying thank you.
Okay. So now moving on to Department 751 and 756, that's Parks and Recreation. You will want to note that you will see in 2021, the salaries of full-time employees is about $125,000. And if you look over at our 21-22, it's $174,000. Why is there such an increase? If you were to actually go before pre-COVID, that number would reflect similarly. We ended up during our budget this past fiscal year using about 9/12 of the year in approximate of wondering what we would do with COVID, whether we would open up or not. There is about a 2.5% increase from the prior year before then. And in regards to salaries of temporary employees, you will see also that note that in 2021, we were at about $199,000 and we've moved to about $281,000. Also the same thing, doing the 9/12. However, there also was the minimum wage went up. And so that's why you'll see that increase. And you're going to see that actually in Parks, Recreation, and the Lavin Center. You will note the temporary employee numbers have increased. At the bottom, I touched on Dog Park previously a little bit. In Recreation, I'm going to move to there for a second. And just the two things of note again is those temporary employees going from that increase due to a minimum wage. And then at the very bottom, if you want to look at the electronic scoring board, this is something that I talked with Mr. Craig about, that this is actually something that each Grosse Pointe is going to pitch in for swim meets. And so they're working together to find the right one that they can actually rotate around to each Grosse Pointe for the swim meets. Any questions regarding Parks and Recreation? Councilmember Robson, then Fluid.
City Manager, you mentioned minimum wage has been increased. What is the minimum wage for these employees?
$9.65. And then Councilmember Fluid. Oh, go ahead.
That's an increase to $9.55?
$9.65.
$9.65. And if you don't know, I understand, but how many temporary employees are we talking about? If you don't have that number, I understand you can get it.
I don't have the number off the top of my head. I do know for recreation, for the pool, we have to hire, I'm going to guess close to 30 lifeguards. So that is quite a bit. Otherwise, in regards to those numbers, that's something I have to check with Chad, and I could update you.
Well, the only thing I would ask then is, it's the same amount of employees, I guess is what I'm asking.
It would be the same amount. Yeah, there's not going to be any increase in there.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Fluid, then McConnell.
Thanks. So one of the things we had talked about in sustainability was probably the first expense the city was going to incur that we were looking at was getting those recycling bins in the parks. Has that been budgeted for here? And if so, how many are we talking about?
So let me go ahead and take a look real quick, because I did talk with Chad about actually increasing the amount of supplies, especially in regards to the grills and others. So let me take a look and find that item real quick for you. Actually, I think we put it, Councilmember Fluid, under operating supplies. So you'll see 41,000 was for 2021, and then 50,000 for this year. Chad still does have room right now. The activity is 33,000 that he was going to look to go ahead and order, probably 4 recycling bins right now. And then obviously we'll see how that works, for this coming year. And then if we need to increase more, we'll go ahead and do so. But he does have room in his budget that allowed him to go ahead and purchase more recycling, not only for outdoors at Windmill Point Park, but over at Patterson and within the Lavin Center.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember McConnell was next.
Actually, I'll wait till you go through, you're going to go through Lavin's next, right?
Yeah, that's my next one. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to do 2 at a time. I'll do, by department, and then I'll try and speed it up. So we'll go to Lavin Center next, and as well the appropriations. So within Lavin Center, you'll note again that the salaries of temporary employees have increased, due to minimum wage. Also within operating supplies, I did note earlier in regards to the COVID-related expenses, but I'll reiterate them again. The movie rental fees, we did budget for 110,000. There's 0 activity to date. And then within concession stand supplies, that was 36,000. And there's 0 activity to date on that as well. What we're hoping for right now is the governor has set a benchmark within the amount of vaccinations throughout the state. We're hoping that 70% mark we're looking at potentially could be August or September. And so that'd be really nice to be able to open up our parks and every other opportunity, Tompkins Center, that we can start to have a little bit of normalcy again. Let's see, in regards to Department 800, that's our gardening, supplies, and planning. You'll note not too much of a change there from 13,607 to 13,948. And so with that said, any questions on those 2? Councilmember McConnell.
So I guess my question is, why do you feel confident to put the same numbers, even with that delayed start, right? Because that is where we took a significant hit in light of the pandemic. I'm just concerned about, matching the predictions from last year that we didn't come close to meeting on almost all of these categories with the movie rental, with some of the other, the theater, membership fees. So, we saw dips in all of these, even as we get vaccinated, people and waiting on other people to dictate sort of when we can do things. Why do we feel like we should keep these higher numbers in this area?
So one of the areas that we've looked at is that obviously, and this is just, what Clerk or Finance Director Blayhut and I have discussed, and then I'll let Mayor Darren, did you have a comment? Or
No.
Before I go?
Go ahead. I was going to amplify what I think you and Jane are going to say. Go ahead.
Okay, so we'll see if we're on the same page. But one of those areas that we're certainly hoping that the earlier the better. And so, if that ends up being August 1st, obviously, that number, we believe very strongly that you're going to see droves of people wanting to come again over to the movie theater in the Tompkins Center. There is a potential actually of July of opening up 70%. I think that's a little hard to say, but it's something that we looked at. And so I'll see if the mayor and I were on the same page.
I think essentially we were, as I recall, and Finance Director Blayhead can clarify this. As I recall, last year when we were going through this process, we were fairly new into COVID, and the pandemic was thought to likely wind down late in the summer, which obviously it has not. And I believe that most of these things that you see that we budgeted this coming year at 9/12, thinking that it's going to be able to ramp up in the fall as everybody gets vaccinated. I believe we expected the same thing to happen last year and didn't budget any of these things at 100% of normal, but at 9/12. And it turned out that we were wrong because obviously the pandemic was much worse and everything stayed shut down all year. So I believe last year's number already reflected 9/12, much like this year's number does. Is that true?
One thing I wanted to mention, I forgot, is that, we had planned for when we were budgeting last year that we weren't even going to open the pool. It had looked like that, you working with the state and the county, I think it ended up being, it was very short after our budget workshop that the pool ended up opening through a county order. And so all of us were scrambling because, the Grosse Pointe had predicted that, we weren't going to have to do this, but however, we had to change. And then Finance Director Blayhead, did you have any other comment regarding such?
Just to agree with that it was at 9/12. So last year's numbers were less than what we expected, anticipating things would open up in September. That's why the numbers are the same for this year, thinking it'll be September.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so moving on to Department 850. You'll note our health insurance, our agent of record is a company by the name of Manquin Vance. And so we were at about 1.8 million for health insurance, increasing to about 1.87. Our unemployment compensation, you're going to note that there was 140,000 within the original budget, and we're predicting about another 140,000 due to unemployment of those employees that were furloughed. And then you'll look at our retirement share, which was about 2 million for this fiscal year, and upcoming fiscal year at about 2.2. And then just to note real quick, in the transferring out of Department 965. That is about, we transferred about 552,000 to the capital improvement fund last year, and we're doing about 800,000 into this capital improvement fund. And a lot of that will go on further when we get to the capital improvement is we have a lot of items that have had deferred maintenance over the years that we really need to look to address. Any questions regarding those two?
Can I clarify something, Nick? On the unemployment, we budgeted 140 last year. Typically, we budget about 10,000, and we budgeted 140 because of COVID. We got billed in October of 20 for calendar year 2019. So that's why I budget 140 going forward. So we're not going to see any more payments to the unemployment for the year we're in. So there will be a savings in the year we're in of 133,000. So I just budgeted the 140, so we'll get billed for calendar year 2020 in October of 21. So going forward, that 140, if COVID ends this year, will not be repeated. I just wanted to clarify that.
Thanks, Jane. Appreciate it. Okay, so I'd like to move on to major roads next within your book. And the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to rotate my book for a second, is I did make a graph noting major street resurfacing, and you'll see that there's actually a potential areas of resurfacing I'd like to discuss for the upcoming year. For 2021, we're looking at for major street fund about 298,000. within those areas. And I'm going to go ahead. This could be for major and local, just so I don't repeat myself. But we're looking at Nottingham from St. Paul to Mac, Somerset from St. Paul to Mac, Edgemont Place is another area, Park Lane, Fairfax from Barrington to Balfour. And then in alleys, there's the Maryland Lake Point Alley from City Hall to St. Paul, Kercheval Alley from Maryland to Beaconsfield. And then the parking lots, we do have a Patterson Park parking lot is in dire need of resurfacing. And the Maryland parking lot, which is behind Point Hardware. And this is something that the Tax Increment Finance Authority has also discussed possibly surfacing with their dollars within the business district capital improvement line item. So moving on, Councilmember Raylan, go ahead. And then Robson.
Thanks, Nick. I was wondering about City Hall. I know we talked about it wasn't going to be included in the City Hall improvements, the City Hall parking lot. Is there a reason not to do that as well?
This is an area we could look into. However, priority wise, I was looking at that, there's some really bad city streets and alleys within that area. However, we could look to see about getting an estimate from our contractor to see what that cost would be. But, we were just trying to, with the dollars we have priority wise, there's a couple areas, but you're absolutely right that the City Hall parking lot is going to have to be addressed, whether it's this year or probably next year.
Okay. Streets you identified are in dire need as well. I'll agree. Like I said, I call them, I'm not going to say what I called them before, but they're at the top of the priorities too. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, no problem. Councilmember Robson.
Just a quick question, City Manager. With the residential blocks that you mentioned being resurfaced, will this complete all the resurfacing since this initiative began approximately 5 years ago? Will they all be completed this year? Do you know? If you don't, get that information later.
So I do believe within the actual streets, that's going to complete quite a bit. I don't know if that's 100% of those that started from 5 years ago. I do recall that when I started back here in 2016 and 17, I believe we were actually, at sometimes at 10 or 12 different streets resurfacing. We were doing quite a bit of work. And so over the years, obviously that number is reduced. And now with the newest millage at 1 mil, the previous millage actually didn't allow for parking lots and alleys, where this new millage, however, will be able to allow for those resurfacing areas, which had not beforehand.
Okay, if you could take a quick side note and check to see if 1100 block of Beaconsfield has been put on a list. I have a resident there that has stopped talking to me because he was on his street was on the list the first year and somehow it never got done. So just as an aside, thank you.
Yeah, and what I'll do is I'll take a look, and just so everybody knows, OHM Advisors, who is our engineer and record, they use what's called a Pazer rating system that actually rates the roads in a map showing there's green, yellow, orange, red. And so we go by those numbers looking at sections of a time where they need to go. But I can definitely take a look at 1100 Beaconsfield, and hopefully we can get your friend to talk to you again. So let me definitely look into that. Okay, so moving on, I did highlight that we're about 298,000 in the major street improvements. And then I'm going to move down to 463 maintenance. You'll note that there's just a slight increase there from 422 to 437. And then just because they're so small, I'll move on to the next one real quick. Traffic Services Department 474. You'll note also about a $10,000 increase. So any questions regarding construction maintenance or traffic services line items, departments? Seeing none, I'm going to move on to 478, which is winter maintenance. And so you'll note in there that a slight increase from 88,000 to 95,000 within winter maintenance. And I'm going to move on. Oh, and a major street fund, that's about 11 miles of major streets within Grosse Pointe Park total. 11.69 to be exact. So with that said, I'm going to move on to local streets. Local streets accompany about 25 miles of within Grosse Pointe Park. And so within the local street improvements fund, we've allocated about $262,000. Within the maintenance fund of Department 463, you'll note a slight increase from 338 to 350,000. Traffic services, you'll note a slight increase from 228 to 241. And winter maintenance, about $2,000 increase there. Any questions regarding those? Seeing none, I'm going to move on to rubbish of 226. So what I'm going to do first, council and the public that was available is Clerk Blayhut provided a memo in here that highlighted the recycling rates. Green for Life has increased the recycling rates from 226,000 to 244, representing an increase of 18,828 annually. And then you will note that that price was from 871 to 995. Those recycling revenues are an expense or budget within the rubbish fund, which we're here at 226. This charge is assessed to each homeowner through the bi-monthly water bill, and the rate increases will go into effect July 1, 2021. And this is something as well, which I highlighted earlier, that we'll be working with Grosse Pointe Farms and the other communities in either asking for an extension with Green for Life or if we go out to bid. And then I'll go ahead and actually go into the estimated revenues and appropriations and see if there's any questions after that. You will note as I discussed before, the curbside recycling fees went up a little bit from 226 to 245. And then in the rubbish disposal, Department 442, I'll note a couple of the changes there. There's the refuse collection from 444 to 481. Refuse recycling again, 226 to 244. And the refuse disposal, which is 235 to 270. And that's working with the Grosse Pointe Clinton Refuse Authority, which comprises of a couple of Grosse Pointes and Harper Woods, and as well J&W, which is the tree composting service that Mr. Brian Coulter, our city forester, utilizes. Any questions regarding those two? Seeing none, I'm going to move on to the building department. Within the building department, I'd like for you to note the occupancy permits. You'll see that in 2021, it was about $80,000, and that number has been decreased to $63,000 because the C of O process is every 2 years, and so this is on the year that'll be the decrease in those numbers. Within the building inspection department, you'll note there's the inspection services and wages that have stayed the same at $168 for the 2021 and 21-22. And then the inspector presale and rentals has decreased from 46 to 32,000. And so you're looking at a reduction within the appropriations of the building department from 321 to 282. Any questions regarding the building department? Councilmember McConnell.
So this is, I'm just curious, the telephone line item just seems really high, $8,000. I'm just curious, why are we paying $8,000 for telephone?
So I know some of that is the cell phone that is provided, part of the stipend. However, I'll ask Clerk Blayhut if she has any more information regarding that telephone line item.
Telephone costs are distributed throughout all of the funds and all of the departments. And in the building department, we get calls all day long within our department. So some of building department and some of our department in the front office is shared, and that's how we allocate those funds.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. Okay, moving on, I'm going to go ahead over into the Downtown Development Authority. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the proposed Downtown Development Authority budget with the graph that I went over with the DDA. What I'd like to note is, the budget for 2021 was 130,000, with 113 from captured taxes and 16,000 in reserves. And year-to-date spent as of April 22nd was about 80,000. The new budget items that we discussed at the DDA include capital improvements for underground infrastructure, crosswalk improvements, and public works moving expenses as the public works building in Jefferson is moving to their new location on Mack Avenue. Otherwise, the other proposed budget items, including legal services, Southern Gardner, DDA director, COVID-19 business support, were all in the previous DDA budget. And so if there's any questions there, I'd be happy to answer those. Councilmember Reed.
Thank you. Yeah, a couple of just really, they're more comments. This is a really small DDA budget, about $140,000, but we have pretty high service fees, legal at 15, a director at 10, and then the moving expenses at 14. Those add up to $39,000. I think that's a huge chunk out of their budget. So I'm a little concerned with that. The level of what we're paying for just services in comparison to the overall budget. And then I did tune into the DDA meeting. And, I think the board members all while they approve the budget, they all expressed concern with using their funds for the sewer line replacement or separation, actually, I believe it was. So, I always go back to the development plan on our tax financing authorities and really, encourage those boards to be focused on what their development plan is. So one thing struck me as I was watching that their budget session was maybe even though they have a small budget, they were having a difficult time coming up with projects on which to spend that money. So those were comments that I had. I'd like to see them spend the money for, street lighting or, facade improvements, those kinds of things that enhance our downtown. So those are comments I had. And just also, I really think the service fees that we have are really high in comparison to the budget. And I wonder if there's a way to bring those down. It seems like even spending $15,000 on legal fees for a $140,000 budget is pretty high.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, definitely within some of those areas, I think we can reduce each item. I do know the DDA had some good comments regarding, their concern regarding, the sewer separation expense. That could be something maybe that, with the 1.1 million from the American Rescue Act, maybe those funds could be used. There also is grant opportunities that we're looking at with either SEMCOG or through other foundations that might be able to assist in that area. And regarding the separation, DPW, this is something that we could look to, to move over into the city general fund. And otherwise, the DDA director, that position is for the availability of hiring a DDA/TIFA director. I'm acting just as that right now, but this would be to hire an actual person to lead both of those boards. And so absolutely, it's something that they did discuss. And, we could shave off a couple of each if be.
Thank you.
And then Councilmember Fluitt, you were next.
Thanks. Okay, so I was glad to hear. I was going to ask about the 10,000 for a dedicated DDA director as well, because I know, that's something we've talked about a little bit. I think it would be great to have at least a part-time person to handle that and take that off your plate. So I'm totally on board with that. I also dislike the DPW moving expenses being part of the TIFA budget, and that was, being part of the DDA budget. And that was something that the DDA board did discuss. They had some good questions about that during their budget meeting. I, I don't think because something is located within the DDA boundaries does not make it DDA eligible necessarily. I don't think, the moving expenses, it's a bit of a stretch to say that that goes toward economic development. So I would like to see those not coming from the DDA.
Mayor Denner.
Yeah, I'm going to comment just a little bit about the DPW moving expenses. As far as whether or not that's a cost that would be eligible to be in the DDA, we had that reviewed, and clearly they are eligible, those sorts of expenses, to support the moving of the old DPW. It's more of a policy question for us. Do we want to leave it here where it's been proposed as part of the DDA budget, or move it to the general fund budget? They are costs that will have to be incurred. If we do decide as a council to move it to the general fund budget, it just impacts surplus appropriations. In other words, it'll come out, incrementally, it would come out of reserve instead of the DDA's tax capture.
And,
So-
I'm going to have, I don't know if you want to have that discussion at the same time. I'm going to have the same thing to say about some of the expenses for the DPW and coming out of the TIFA budget as well.
Yeah, I think it's a policy question that this council needs to decide, and we should discuss it tonight, but decide whether or not we want to put forth any amendments on Monday in this area. In both cases, it's a question in my mind of what this council's policy wants to be as far as that the TIF and DDA can cover these expenses. It's in the sense of taxpayer efficiency. It's an efficient way to cover the expenses because of the tax recapture. However, if we chose to move those back to the general fund in both of those cases, they would have to come out of reserves because they have to be funded from someplace. So that it's, as I said, I think it turns out to be a policy point on our part, and we can deal with that as we wish. Okay, that's all I had to say.
Does that mean we should have a discussion on that, or are we?
Well, I think maybe, well, what I'd suggest is that we go through the TIFA budget a little bit, and then because the items related to DPW are in both, then we could have a little discussion about where council is on that policy point.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. So moving on, I'm going to move on to over to
Nick, I have one real quick question.
Go right ahead.
Thanks. So we have capital improvements at 50K, and then we have pedestrian walkways at 10. And then on the last page of this report for DDA, it says that the capital improvements include underground infrastructure and crosswalk improvements. So I'm wondering if that crosswalks are in the 50K as well as a pull out of traffic pedestrian walkways of 10K. Are those overlapping at all, or do they need to be? Is that correct? Is what I'm asking too, because you have capital improvements of crosswalks as well.
Yeah, and so I have capital improvements in regards to crosswalks as well, and sidewalk improvements, within those funds.
Okay, so traffic pedestrian walkways is different than crosswalks. That's what I'm asking, because you have them separated.
Oh, yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah, I apologize. So what we could do, we could actually look to increase the traffic pedestrian walkways within that area. So if we wanted to move some of that 50,000 over into the traffic pedestrian walkways, we could do so. One thing that really, if you give me one moment, please, what I'll do is we were very fortunate that actually as part of the Westchester and Somerset improvement over on Jefferson, we were expecting a further cost in regards to that improvement. However, DTE was working literally in the area at the same time. And so we tried to see if we could partner and save some dollars in regards to that. And so we did save, I'm going to guess close to $10,000 just having they're a cement contractor, major cement over there at that same time. And so we got fairly lucky with that. However, I do believe there is some certain improvements that are still needed within those areas. I do know something that's always a challenge with Jefferson Avenue. I've seen quite a bit of what's the term, jaywalking, over to like Mimi's Bistro and that area from residents that are over in the apartments right behind City Hall, and over here. And so that's something that we're gonna have to work further with the county, because anything that we do is gonna require that county approval. And, I do believe that is a need. And that's something that DDA has really expressed interest in, that we improve definitely that area to, from the sidewalk going across the median over to Mimi's, Hungry Howie's, in those businesses.
Yeah, over those islands that are there as well. So yeah, that'll be a good plan to design. So cool. I was just wondering if they were the same thing. So thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna move on to Tifa next. So what I'm going to do is actually go ahead. It is the item that I have to Tifa that includes the proposed budget with the summary. And so I'm going to read some of that for you so we're all on the same page. The 2021 budget was about 1.3 million, with 933 from captured property taxes and about 395 in reserves. Year to date, we've spent about 553,000, and that'll conclude on June 30th. The new proposed budget is going to be about 983,000 in captured property taxes, include 460,000 in reserves. Newer continuing items of note in this budget include a $100,000 line item for COVID-19 and business grant opportunities. We have had, as of right now, 3 rounds of COVID grants that have, I'll have to look at it, but I think actually it's about 72,000 that we've spent activity year to date. So, and it's worked out quite well. And I'd really like to thank my assistant, Leah Smith, who's been tremendous with this program in regards to her grant experience. And so I really want to give my hats off to Leah for that. And so engineering and professional services, we're looking at about 75,000. And to the mayor's point, a little bit about Department of Public Works is included in the budget. That is the DPW installment purchase contract. That's part of the bond payment, which will be $305,000 approximately, which will be paid in October of 2021. We had predicted that within this fiscal year that we were going to have to use that note payment. And so that's actually being carried over from this fiscal year over into the next 21-22 fiscal year. Other DPW related expenses we put within the TIFA budget it includes the security system, IT services, office furniture and equipment. TIFA members, as I was polling them looking for items within what they'd like to see those resources spent into, included those grant opportunities, marketing, parking improvements, including off-street reconfiguration, streetscape, social district. LED lighting was something very important that we'd like to do in the business district. We do have some over on Mack Avenue as part of that streetscape improvement. We'd like to see some of that mirror over on Charlevoix and Kercheval and Charlevoix. And that's one of those things that the Sustainability Committee has discussed heavily of LED lighting. And that's something that I will, when we get further to the discussion, I'll actually include our electrical personnel, Mr. Mike Kraus, who is he works on all these lights within the city, and he'll be able to give us that help, and something that I know he's certainly going to be very interested in, not having to fix those lights all the time. Other areas include street fairs, so that'll be on Charlevoix and Kercheval, alley resurfacing and improvements to any stormwater over there. Bike-friendly improvements, so purchasing of bike racks and possible, whether we ended up doing bike lanes in the future potentially. Electric vehicle charging stations, however, there are grant opportunities for that. Front yard lighting, that has been a continuing program of the TIFA for those lights in front of the West Park area. Tree planting is something that they really wanted to see more of an emphasis within the residential improvements. And I already highlighted underground infrastructure and sidewalk. And so with that said, I'd be happy to take any questions regarding the Tax Increment Finance Authority with Councilmember McConnell first.
Unmute. Thank you. So I wanted to say first, I'm glad to see the continuation of the grant program as well as some additional dollars for marketing for the businesses. As you know, we certainly heard that they could use that support. So I appreciate that being in here. But I do have concerns that the line item for residential improvement decreased significantly from the prior year. And I'm just wondering, and just to clarify, are the items that you just detailed, those are the residential improvements? Or is there something else you can elaborate as it relates to that? But I would love to see if there's a way to put more resources into the residential improvement program if possible. And yes, shift the DPW stuff somewhere else.
Okay, and so in regards to the 2021 budget, there was a high amount of about $425,000. And if you look at the business district capital improvements item, that was about $80,000. Looking at this, I thought that was a disproportionate number between the residential and the business districts. And so I decided to break that into an even number, into 225 for both of those. So that's why you see 225,000 in regards to that. In regards to residential improvements program, something that we discussed at TIFA is, whether we can look into garage improvements over within the West Park area, sidewalk, trees or something, whether that's tree pruning or tree planting. Councilmember Reed, I will get to you right after I'm done. Alley and underground work. And then did you have another question, Councilmember McConnell? Or was that it? I apologize.
No, that's okay. The last one was just a statement about the DPW. So.
Okay. Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, I had some similar questions, like, for example, the residential improvement program for our 2020-21 budget, we had $425,000, but through activity is only $124,000. I don't know if we have some outstanding plans that will come to fruition before the end of this fiscal year, but we didn't spend the budgeted amount. And I go back to the development plan for the TIFA, which is for commercial and residential improvements in the TIFA district. And I know, I would like to see those residential improvements more defined. I know years ago, there were a number of programs, interest-free loans that weren't paid back until homes were sold. Legally, I don't know if that's still permitted, but also parking improvements, residential parking improvements. So as you mentioned, grants or loans to allow residents to fix their garages or fix their parking situation on their property, because we spent a lot of time talking about parking both in general and in particular at the TIFA board meetings. But one way to alleviate some of the parking complaints is to help the residents facilitate that on their own property. So my question is, why didn't we spend the extra $300,000 on the residential improvements, or are we still going to? And can we have that program defined, and since you're the acting TIFA director right now, that's just a comment that I have for the board.
Okay, so yeah, I can comment to that. One of the areas that we're hoping if we can complete before this fiscal year end is potential for alley resurfacing within that improvement. That is something that TIFA did agree, if they could help to do, they would look so. As well, the tree trimming and tree planting, I believe that there's still, it's something that they would like to do as well. So those are areas that we could still use some of those dollars into there. In regards to the garage, something I do completely agree with you, Councilmember Reed, that is something that I've heard time and time again, and especially from code enforcement. I know Councilmember Robson has brought it up as well to me numerous times that in yourself, Councilmember Reed, that, there's, some garages in some disrepair, some to the potential that, they're not even used anymore. And so, this is a program that, Ms. Leah Smith and I were certainly working on to see if whether that's through a loan or through a grant, that whether that's through an improvement so that that garage is then used for a parking space, or that's a tear down to actually allow for a concrete pad to go in, get off the street or the alley. And so those are a program that we will be defining further, and that's something that the TIFO would like to have seen done. So a defined process, that's something that we're going to be working on and we'll have available at a future date.
Thank you.
And Mayor Denner.
Yeah, it's more of a comment than a question. In observing the TIFA board in recent meetings, one of the things I'd like everyone to note is that there are a number of new members on the TIFA board with sort of a new energy and some new ideas about what we could do for improvements. And at the last TIFA meeting, I noted that the chairman set up a subcommittee to identify residential improvement priorities so that we're responsive to, so that board is responsive to the items that are most important. So in terms of the definition of one of those specific residential improvements, I think that that my sense from just observing anyway was that that a lot of that was intended to come out of this subcommittee of residents who can focus on what they believe are the most important needs in their neighborhoods. So that's just a comment. That's all I've got.
Councilmember Fluid.
Thanks. So first of all, can you break down the difference? I'm assuming director/finance at $30,000. Is that for also to go toward a new part-time TIFA director?
That's correct.
Okay. And then, so what is the salary for full-time employees?
So part of that is actually, part of that's looped into payroll here at City Hall. Leah, myself, and a little bit, and then actually going back down to finance, that's also a part of Jane's wages.
Okay, I thought it might be a little bit, because I know you can kind of prorate. Jane is doing work for TIFA and DDA, but your full salary is listed under city manager budget, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so tell me again who falls under full-time TIFA employees for the 61,500.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I apologize for that. I went a little too quick. You are correct. So yeah, I'm not in there. That's actually for, whether we were to hire a, also with the director, some of that, and then payroll and other employees within City Hall, and including Leah. I'll ask Jane. I think I covered them all. Jane, is there anyone else that's covered within that area?
Nope, I think you covered it all.
So is the bulk of Leah's salary coming from the TIFA?
Yes, that's correct.
Is the bulk of the work she does for the TIFA?
With the amount of work that Leah's been working on TIFA grants and working on other areas, I would say yes. A bunch of Leah's time is spent within the TIFA and DDA.
Okay, that's a little bit vague. I think we need to be mindful of that. I would just like to see things well defined in terms of, what our TIFA and our DDA are paying for. I think it's fair to say they're a little more flush than the general city budget is, but that kind of brings us back to the discussion of, whether they should be paying for furniture for the new DPW building. And before we get into that discussion, I want to agree that I think, you know, the residential improvement and the business district capital improvement funds, which together are budgeted for 450,000, which is about a third of the budget for this year, the proposed budget. I also would like to see that a little better defined. I think the mayor made a great point about the new members on the TIFA board seem very energized. They have a lot of ideas. And I think that's great. And I saw a lot of stuff thrown around at the last meeting, but 450,000 is a lot of money. And I would like to kind of get a general idea of where that's going to go and assurances that they're going to engage the residents in the TIFA district in that planning.
Okay, I noted that. Thank you. Councilmember Robson.
Yeah, just one quick comment. The TIFA board approved this budget. I understand that. And at least for this year, it looks like they cut the baby down the middle in terms of residential improvements in business improvement. I understand that for this year, but this will be my last budget hearing. Obviously, I'm not running for re-election again, so this is my time to give it a shot. I'd like to see a bump up in future TIFA budgets on the residential side. You've just mentioned about difficulties with blight, garages and what have you. So I think we need to bend more over to the residential needs as opposed to the business needs as well. Thank you.
Noted. Thank you. Any other comments before we move on?
I think that the council wanted to further explore the three DPW related line items in TIFA and the one DPW related item line item in DDA. I believe that was what council wanted to discuss. I think Councilmember Rowland suggested we do a discussion, and so did a couple others.
Yeah, it kind of came to a standstill after you made your comments, Mayor Denver. So I wasn't sure where we were going with that. So, well,
before we leave TIFA, I think that we ought to at least get a sense of where you all are on that, on those items. It'd be about $165,000 that's included in the TIFA budget that relate to setting up the new DPW, and $14,000 in the DDA budget that relate to moving the DPW out of the DDA. So I think those were the items that council wanted to further discuss. If you do, otherwise, if you don't want to further discuss it, that's fine with me. We can deal with it as an amendment or not an amendment on Monday. I just didn't want to cut off discussion on that. If you wanted to have other people state their opinions.
Nick, real quick question. Go ahead, Nick. You can go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple things of note I wanted to point out. One of the things, this is something that has been discussed by the TIFA board, that they certainly were amenable to helping out with the DPW, not only the note payment, but also the other related expenses. I know the question has come up before whether or not TIFAs or DDA should be using those dollars for public facilities that actually benefit the entire area. And so I did a little research and digging, looking around the state to find if there were any other similar projects that have been done. And so I'll just read off a couple. Fenton, for example, used a bond for their fire hall and DPW. Portland, Michigan used funds for City Hall. Traverse City used dollars for reconstruction of bridges. Wyandotte used TIF dollars for their fire station. And Richmond, Michigan also used DPW dollars there. And so it's something that is allowed within the statute for the TIFA. I just wanted to note that, and something that the TIFA is amenable for those payments. I certainly can understand the DDA concern regarding those moving expenses, and I think that's something that we could look to move. And so I just wanted to let you guys know that real quick before we get into those. So I apologize if I cut in a little bit, but I just wanted you all to know. Councilmember Raylan was first and then Reed. So
You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was just going to confirm that security system, the IT services, and the furniture office equipment are all one-time fees. Those are the installation fees, and those won't be recurring.
Yeah, and that's something that it actually was proposed first about $140,000. And so Tifa said, well, can we, that seems a little high. I did too. And so we actually reduced that number and changed that over into a line item called MAC improvements that we're hoping that we might be able to, have new entrance signage entering into Grosse Pointe Park from Mac Avenue.
Okay, but no, the DPW security system, the IT services, and the furniture and office equipment, those are all just one-time fees. Those won't be on the budget next year.
Those won't be in the budget next year, no.
So those are just to implement those services, okay.
Unless DPW really destroyed the furniture, I wouldn't be happy, but that's about the only thing I could see.
Yeah, cool, thank you, I'm all set.
Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, so, I think it's been established because we did it that we can use TIFA funds for the construction of the DPW. That's done. I'm, even though it's a small amount, I'm more concerned that the DDA would be spending 10% of their budget on a facility that's not on moving expenses. I think it is really a policy matter. I would like their funds to be spent in their district, and that's not happening with that line item. The other, TIFA has a much bigger budget. What is on the TIFA budget for the DPW is going to exist in the TIFA district. But I do think, just as a policy matter, it's dangerous we have these funds there, but it's dangerous to use them to fill in some budget items that really serve the whole city and that aren't really aligned with the development plan. But having said that, I'm less concerned with something that is going to be, the physical part of the DPW building with what you have on the TIF, with what the TIFA board has proposed in their budget. I don't really think we should be using that small DDA budget. I'd rather have more flowers or more lighting or something tangible in the DDA than spending that money to move the DPW. And then in the future, I really do want to keep those funds. It's a tax capture. I don't want to give up those funds. I want to keep them here, but I want to use them on residential and commercial improvements that benefit the district, specifically where the DPW does, because we're building something there, but it exists for the city as a whole. So those are my sort of policy comments.
Well, those are great comments. One thing, before I guess we get that sense of council, certainly I think, and I respect that, but within the DDA, I think we could definitely look to move those moving expenses out of the DDA budget. And then Councilmember Fluid.
Thanks. I'm actually going to go back to the city attorney, because usually I have my laptop here and I can look things up, which is one thing that's nice about Zooming from home, but I don't. Somebody said something that jogged my memory. Is there something in the statute that says TIFA funds can be used for city infrastructure or municipal not municipal improvements, but municipal, like what we did for the DPW, where public buildings, thank you, where the TIFA funds can be used for a facility that has to do with municipal government.
I don't recall specifically in the statute if those exact words are used. I know we have a memo that was circulated before as part of the bond process for TIFA, And as Nick had mentioned, it's not an uncommon use of TIFA funds, and it's permissible in our view and based on our research under the statute. I'm looking at the statute now and it's long. I just don't recall if those words specifically are in there, but we did do that research and it is a permitted use of TIFA funds.
I think if you look hard enough, you'll find the words public building in there somewhere. Yeah. Because I've seen them there before.
Yeah,
Okay, thanks.
just as a, oh, go ahead. Oh, you were done, sorry.
That's it. Yeah, thank you.
I'll stop interrupting now. I'll let everyone go with their sense. Councilmember Hodges.
Thank you, City Manager. Just to weigh in a bit on this issue, I think we've obviously already distinguished between the capital improvements and the moving expenses, and it does seem to make sense that the moving expenses be shifted back to general fund, and that the area for remaining up for discussion is the capital piece. And my sense is, just really respecting the city manager form of government, you've researched this very well, and found a precedent and determined that it is legally allowable. And you have a puzzle that you need to create here. And we really want to enable you with every management tool that you have so that this budget works, and allows you to execute the duties that are set before you. So we really do need to understand the implications of shifting that expenditure if in fact we go that route. And there would be two other considerations that I would add to that table. To that rationale would be whether or not we want to add to our deficit significantly when we actually have a tool available to us that prevents us from doing that. And then the fact that our TIFA board actually did analyze this and did approve it, I think gives it some credence as well. So I still want to hear additional analysis, and City Manager, if any of this discussion has shifted your recommendation in any way, that would really matter to me in terms of my end decision on this. But just want to make sure that we do consider all of those things to get to the right place in finalizing a budget.
The quick comment I can make is I think, with the DDA, I think that $14,000 is something that we can, since Councilmember Reed is correct, that is about 10% out of that budget, and we could really use that extra 10,000 maybe for Southern Gardner or other improvements. I think that's certainly an amenable area we can move. I would be very concerned about moving $165,000 out of TIFA into the city general fund. That is a little bit of a concern of mine. So those are my general comments.
Thank you. That's
Mayor
helpful.
Denner.
I wanted to kind of support the direction that we're leaning in here, and that would be to possibly on the DDA side make an amendment on Monday to move the 14,000 back to the general fund and then manage it there. In the scheme of the general fund, that's probably okay. And the differentiation of the physical, the capital nature of security system and the three items here that add up to 165 in the TIFA, and the fact that until the bond is paid off, the TIFA actually will legally own the DPW building and the things that are sort of permanently attached to it, which these tend to be. I'm pretty comfortable with leaving these here as they have been discussed and approved, but I also am comfortable with moving the 14 out of the DDA if that's what council decides on Monday. Just wanted to let you know where I was on that.
Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to miscellaneous. Good discussion. Thank you, guys. Definitely, we had good discussions within both the DDA and TIFA, and so this was another part of it. So thank you for that. We're going to move through these next couple ones. They're miscellaneous. They're pretty small. So I'll go ahead and go into three different departments. The 260 Indigent Defense Fund, that's for court-appointed attorneys. The state does provide funds for those areas, and that's for our municipal court above. 265 Drug Law Enforcement, that's a sale of confiscated property, or sometimes known as asset forfeiture. And so you'll see it's a very small budget, about $3,000 there. And then CDBG block grant funds. This is another area significantly that I used to do, but I've had Leah take over for me. That she's working with the Helm and the senior the senior bus transportation. This is something that Commissioner Tim Colleen works with us closely with the Grosse Pointe and Harper Woods and giving helping us with those dollars that each Grosse Pointe provides approximately. It's 20,000 actually. Yes, 20,000 each Grosse Pointe provides to those senior services. Any question regarding those three? Okay, seeing none. I'm going to go on to, I've got a couple more. So we're going to go to 305 bond issue. This was for the 2007 bond. That was about $7 million. That's going to be paid off in 2027. Part of this and was for the acquisition of properties within the city, and also the emerald ash borer had really taken a toll within Grosse Pointe Park, and so we had to remove about 250 trees within Grosse Pointe Park, unfortunately, due to that emerald ash borer. And then 307 capital improvement bonds.
There's going to be a couple of questions on that one, I think, or a comment.
Yeah.
Okay, so how about you first, Mayor, and then Councilmember Reed?
Well, actually, Councilmember Reed had her hand up first. I'll cede the floor to her.
Thank you. Just real quick on the 2007 bond, just for clarification, the money has already been spent. The property acquisition, the emerald ash borer, this is just the debt service. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, that was part of what I was going to say as well. So we're on the same page there. And the 2007 bond, was based on it was approved by a vote of the residents. So it's not this bond couldn't exist without a vote to approve the issuance of the bond, which did occur in 2007.
Okay, 307 is the capital improvement bond series for the City Hall. That was approved by City Council. And so you'll actually start seeing some activity approximately here within the next 4 weeks for the roof and the windows of City Hall to start that work. Fund 308 is DPW, the TIFA bond payment, excuse me. Is $4 million. And so some of those dollars have been spent already on legal fees and bond paperwork as part of that process. Any questions regarding those two? Seeing none, I'm going to move on. I did touch on it earlier, but I'll touch just for a tad on Fund 306 for roads. The current property taxes about $650,000, and so 475 of that is from will be to local streets, 174 to major, and that was a 1 mil rate, which was rolled back to 0.96 for our millage rate. Any question regarding that one? Seeing all eyes looking below, I think I can move on. This is the fund one, the Capital Improvement Fund, 401. So what I'd like to note within here is that in 2021, we had approximately about $552,000 within the capital improvement, and you'll see within this requested budget, $800,000. I believe I'll be able to explain why you see such an increase within that area. A lot of this has been deferred maintenance over the years that we really need to look to bring up to speed within certain areas within the city. And so I'm going to highlight a couple of those for you tonight. Park server upgrade. The server that's over at Parks and Rec is about 7 years old. That's usually beyond the lifespan of a server, and so that's why you see a $9,000 increase or $9,000 payment there. That should not be for probably another 5 or 6 years afterwards. $35,000 for a Park and Rec pickup truck. This is for a brand new truck. From what I recall and what I've been told, I don't know if Park and Rec has ever had a new truck. And so this is something that'll certainly help them out in regards to their maintenance. Otherwise, they typically get the we'll call it retired pickup trucks from DPW. And so we want to provide our Parks and Rec maintenance, something that's a little more suitable. Kayak racks, this is something continuously within the capital improvement fund that, we look to update. Chad advised me, and Councilman Reed, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's about 125 people on that waiting list, somewhere around there. Okay.
That's correct.
I see a head nod. Okay. And so we're hoping that, we could generate about 9,600 in revenue from the purchase of more kayak racks. And so it's something that certainly, we have a lot of done. And then the biggest item you'll see in here is the Park and Rec tennis court reconstruction. It is a high number. It is $160,000. And this is something that has been kind of kicked down the road a couple, within years. Mr. Craig has done a good job of working with contractors and listening to residents and such of, we really need to tackle these areas and fix. We did see if there was a potential that we could maybe, I don't want to say a Band-Aid, but that's all I can think of right now is the term. And unfortunately, a Band-Aid would still cost us about $135,000 and only put us at maybe about 5 years. And so at that point, we decided I think it would be worthwhile for that $160,000 for a reconstruction of those tennis courts. And so that's why you see such that high number there. Moving down to about the middle of your page, you're going to see CAD computer for $50,000. That is something that is a requirement for the public safety department that they asked us to look to add within the capital improvement fund. Moving down a little further to MDI HVAC update Park and Rec. That is a cost of $16,687 for continual maintenance. However, I did talk with Mr. Craig, and that is something that if council considered, we could look to defer that cost, and that's not going to hurt us at all if we were to do so, and that's $16,687. As well, you're going to look at website revise. It has been discussed by council. We did get a new website. We're still, I believe, about, off the top of my head, it might be 2 years away from a complete reconstruction of the website. However, looking at it, there's some improvements that we can make within our website, and Revise has modules that you can actually add, or modules, apps, however you'd like to call it. Some of those areas that we've looked into, but certainly this could be something that if we don't want to spend those dollars, we could, just pay the annual service fee. But a business directory that's featured on the city website, we could have a Google Maps app that would, showcase maybe public parking or other areas, where's Patterson, where's Windmill Point. FAQs, how do I, get to this? How do I do that? Simple, helpful tips. The e-notify system, this is something that as soon as a update is put on the city website, residents can sign up for and get immediate alerts when, something's been added to the finance section of the website, or they'd like to, just pick and choose which areas they'd like to be notified about. And then another one that, Mr. Craig and I have discussed is parks reservation. This could be something that, we do use with Rec Pro, and typically Chad and Chris, they do a pretty good job of working with residents, they walk in their office and call them, but maybe there's an opportunity that we could look to see about having a reservation system online, whether that's for the Tompkins Center, whether that's for the gymnasium at the Lavin Center. That's another module app that we could look into. So that's why you see that $16,000 there. Moving down a little further, it's the last three items I'm going to note before opening up for questions. The boiler room Olympic pool. I've been advised by Chad that this is a boiler that is quite old and is in dire need of replacement for the Olympic-sized pool. The zero depth pool valve replacement. That also actually is a replacement valve for the Olympic pool, and that's $16,500. And he did note that is something that is needed. And the commercial turn mower bagger, it is a wish list item. So that's something if council wanted to put off The recreation department did say they could hold off for another year, and that's about $9,000 within that. So those are the ones I'd like to note of new. Otherwise, I'm happy to take questions or comments or priorities of what you'd like to see. Councilmember Reed, Fluid, then McConnell.
Thank you. It looks like we've, what we transferred in from 2021, we have about 170,000 still to spend. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Do we anticipate incurring that this fiscal year?
Yes.
Okay. And then just real quick on the revise, does that 16,000 offer us any ability to do some tweaking on what we have now on our website? Some of the things we've discussed in communications. And I don't want to take too much time on that, but if you know.
I'm going to have to ask on that
Okay.
question. I do apologize not having an answer, but
we'll revisit that later. Okay, thank you.
And then I think Councilmember Fluid, then McConnell.
I just had one question, which was the tennis court for 160. Has that already, or will it be put out for bids?
I do believe that Chad actually contacted the multiple contractors trying to get prices. He's been working on this, I'm going to say, for probably over a year, trying to get prices. And, you know, oftentimes he wasn't having any luck with contractors actually wanting to do the work or interested. And so I couldn't tell you the number of bids he actually has, but I know that's something he has been working on. And from the dollars he had advised us of, this was the cheapest cost.
Okay.
So I'm sorry. So I think spoke to most of what I was going to ask. I just want to clarify the website. So we were that's part of an ongoing contract that we already have. That those dollars.
Right now, our annual service fee is about $3,500. And so from a couple of those apps, talking with Revise, they're estimated about $3,000 on average. So that'd be an additional fee on top, depending upon which modules or apps we add. And so I just wanted to, you know, bring that to our attention. If that's an area that we'd like to look to see if we can potentially add some things into our city website, or a research assignment now of Councilmember Reed and for communications is seeing if maybe we can get an early head start and see if maybe we can use some of those dollars for a little more of a, I'll call a retooling of the website.
And I just wanted to clarify from earlier when we were having the TIFA discussion that you know, if we had moved down that road, I would have looked for us to find savings that would cover that. I certainly wouldn't want to do anything that's going to put any undue burden on the residents. So, but I think we've already moved on from that. But I just wanted to clarify my position on that. Thank you.
Councilmember Hodges.
Thank you, City Manager Seisland. I just would like to thank the administration while wearing my council member for finance hat throughout this process and the discussions that you and I have had in the past week. I felt my job was to inspire critical thinking in you all. So one of my questions to you was, if forced to cut, you know, what would your priorities be and what would the implications of those decisions be? So for example, if you cut the kayaks, yes, you might save up front, but you lose your revenue source. And that revenue source is in excess of the actual cost. So I just really appreciate the thought that you've put into this and the diligence that you've conducted so that we can make good informed decisions tonight and Monday night, I should say. So thank you for that.
And certainly, I do want to say too, and I appreciate that. You know, we couldn't have done this all without Jane, Chad, Pat Thomas, Lieutenant Bostock. It's really across the board. Everybody's challenged and found areas that, you know, they do realize there is a there is a shortfall due to COVID this year, and so everybody's really dug deep to find, okay, what are my priorities? Are they high, medium, low? And what are the areas that if we absolutely have to, we can put off? So I just wanted to note that, because really, it's a team effort here, and it's something that it's been really great to work with. Mayor Denner.
Before we leave capital improvement, I just want to point out that these items, I believe, were vetted pretty thoroughly by the administration as the most important things that they wanted to do. I agree with Michelle's comment. I also wanted to kind of loop back to an earlier discussion we had about our reserve position, which is significant, and when does it make sense to tap into reserves? And I think one of the things that, from my point of view, that it makes sense to tap into reserves is to reinvest in our in the capital of our city government, so that the residents get the advantage of either the new capabilities or the new equipment or whatever it is that shows up in capital improvement. And I think that philosophically, policy-wise rather, I think that bumping up the capital improvement budget is very consistent with the relatively high position that we enjoy with our reserves in the city. Okay.
Councilmember Raylan.
Thanks, Nick. I just want to reiterate about the one high item for the tennis court. I've been badgering Nick and Chad for a couple of years about the tennis courts, and a couple of the residents and I have been talking to him. So I understand where you guys are coming from, and the Band-Aid has been put on for years. So I know you're going to make a lot of people happy with resurfacing that or rebuilding it, it seems like. So I just wanted to add that into council that Nick and Chad and I have been talking for a couple of years on that. So
it was good badgering, Councilmember Raylan. It was something that we definitely needed to work on over the years. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and Chad mentioned many times, hey, we can put a Band-Aid on it. It costs 10 grand. It'll get us through. But that he was waiting for this big hit. So thanks for doing that research.
He's very happy. Okay, I'm going to move on now over into the water and sewer fund. And so what I'm going to do is just highlight a couple areas actually within Jane's letter that went out to council and the public. Just to note real quick, within the sewer, the 2021 flat rate did increase. And so you'll see from about 1.8 to 1.894 in regards to sewer rates, which it was an increase of about 82,000. The water flat rate was reduced due to the GLWA contract that we did sign as council, which is a reduction of about 68,400. The water flow rate, if you look at the 2021, went from 1104 to 1021. So that also was a decrease of 89,000. And so we are saving, if you look at water and sewer, both about $74,000 within that area. Something that the administration, we recommend right now is that we would hold those water and sewer rates at their status quo levels. And digging in a little further into those areas within the sewage disposal and sewer pump station, just a couple quick notes for you. We did have quite a large purchase of the Mack truck front loader. This is something that DPW typically has had older front loaders that you'll see. They use this on water main breaks. And so having a new front loader, something that they're going to be able to have for the next 15, 20 years. And so I thought this was a worthy investment for the city. And then another thing I want to note was the jetter vac. We have a reduced cost within repairs to that. And it's something, it was at 30,000. Now we're looking at 16,000 for those potential repairs. I believe the jetter vac is actually, it's early 2000s. We did apply for a grant through the Eagle, and we're still awaiting whether or not we can, have potentially dollars for a new jetter vac. It still works quite well, but certainly if we can get a new one and look to sell this would certainly be helpful for DPW. Otherwise, I'll note real quick within the sewer pump station, Department 528, you only see an increase of about $4,000 within that line item. And that's the pump station behind me at City Hall here. that we have our electrician, Mike Kraus, also as our pump station manager. Any questions regarding those two? All right, seeing none, I'm going to go down to water department real quick. One of the two things or actually one thing of note, repair water meters and hydrants. This is something that we're continuously trying to update our metering for homes. There's different sizes depending on the size of the home, and this actually helps in the amount of reading how much water is going through. The ones now are so much more accurate, where our older meters, the residents might be saving a couple dollars, and I can understand, but we do have to update them, and so that's why you see that cost there. And then moving over to 535, that was the next page within your packet. You'll see the Sterling dump box with tarp. That is an expense that we needed a new dump box for our water board truck. You'll probably see it going around town. It is utilized immensely by our water department, and so that's why you see that cost there. And then we are looking at purchasing two new pickup trucks with plows. And then also there is a line item for a Bobcat. And so that's also used within that department. Bobcat, you typically see them over at Parks and Rec. They're the little thing, they go on the sidewalk. They actually now have Bluetooth now and USB. It's pretty cool. So those are my comments there. Sorry, I like the Bobcats. Any questions? I kind of wish I had one. Councilmember Robson.
Thank you, City Manager. Just getting back to the two pickup trucks with plows, I'm sure you've had the discussion with Director Thomas. I guess my initial question is, do we have a need for two, or could we get by with one, given that they're $44,000 a piece? Maybe you can articulate that. Is there a strong need for two, or could we defer one for 1 year?
So talking with Public Works, initially their wish list request was for 3. We decreased that down to 2. And so I would say, I think it is certainly an extreme need. They were looking at having 3, but if that's something, I could go back and work with Mr. Thomas to see if we could, defer to 1 more year on just 1 truck.
I would appreciate it if you would check with them. Thank you very much.
And then Mayor Denner.
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Councilman Fluid.
Thanks. So it's a much bigger picture issue, but this seems like a good time to raise it. Is the federal funding that we're going to get, which the last I heard was about 1.1 million, is that allocated in here, or are we still waiting for more detail about exactly what it can be spent on? And when I say in here, I don't mean in the water fund. I mean in everything that we've looked at tonight. No. So that's something that we wanted to make sure we knew the exact amount that we'd be getting from the federal government. Where, I said about 1.1 approximately. I think it was like 1.187,000. But until we actually have that deposit and, note from the Treasury, we didn't want to put that in there. But what we would look to do, depending upon the infrastructure upgrades, which I definitely think that's something that we would look to have a high level of work, whether that's water mains, lead service lines, meters, that would be deposited into the water and sewer fund. There is the potential to, I did highlight economic assistance, that we could also have into another area of the budget, especially for the Mac Caju businesses that are out, Mac Caju and just those businesses right outside of Nottingham that are not in the Tifa district as another area from that 1.1 million. Because the Grosse Pointes are kind of talking together and seeing if we can find out when. I know I've read SEMCOG information and others trying to find out when we're going to get that deposit. And that's something that I know our Public Service Committee is eager to meet sometime soon, where I'd like to bring for their discussion and also to council
in regards to, I'm going to say the name dwarf, but it's DWRF, which is the Drinking Water Revolving Fund, which is a loan from the state of Michigan. And so OHM Advisors is working on this, and we hope to have those discussions there. There's the potential that 1.1 million can be used towards that, which will help out. I can tell you right now, we have a couple shovel-ready projects, certainly that, we can definitely from day one, as soon as those dollars are there, we could hit. But, we'll have that further discussion and be happy to talk, with the public service, the Public Service Committee meeting, City Council. I'd be happy to hear your priorities too, if you think there's areas we really need to look at. I know, number one in my mind right now really is lead service lines, water main, that really, really need to be addressed within the park. So I went off a little, but hope that helped.
No, I agree. I think all of us realize that's our next really huge project that we're going to have to talk about soon. But you and I have also talked about, and I feel very strongly about that, about providing those COVID grants to that handful of businesses that we were not able to reach through the DDA and the TIFA funds. There's Fairfax Market, there's the businesses up at Mac and Caddo. And I had asked about them some time ago. We haven't been able to do anything for them yet, but the information that I got when MML did their presentation about how we could use these federal funds is that we can definitely help those businesses out in the same way that we've helped out our TIFA and DDA businesses. So yes, I feel strongly about that. So if we're holding off on that, are we going to have further discussion about it tonight, or is that going to be, we're going to go with the budget that we have and we're going to come back to those federal funds once we actually receive them? How are we going to handle that?
Personally, what I would like to do, is that as soon as those dollars are received, it's something we'll have that further discussion at the Public Service Committee meeting. And I think also at a City Council level, that discussion could be placed. I do think that it's, no matter what, we do have some real serious needs we need to hear. I'd be happy, obviously, to take resident comments. And I know council, you're probably receiving as well those comments because the residents do know that those dollars are going to be received and see what, they think their priorities are. So I'll let the mayor go.
No, I was going to say, continue, finish up.
No, I was just kind of ranting. I'm done.
So my expectation, and I think Nick said it, but I'd summarize it this way, is that when the rules are clear and we know for sure when we're going to get the funds timing wise and what segments, that we're going to bring that back to council with a plan, with an investment plan for utilization of those funds. So it will come back to council so that we have an opportunity to approve or fine tune the allocation of those funds once a little bit more definition is available from the government.
Okay.
Councilmember Hodges.
Just on that note, City Manager, being faced with the same scenario in my day job, my two favorite words have been strategic and leverage. So I would inspire you with those two words to make sure we are able to leverage every single one of those dollars effectively. And I'm happy to talk with you about how we're doing that.
Okay, thank you. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to move on to the marina. So I did address some of this a little bit earlier, but you'll note within the estimated revenues, we did go from 293,000 to about 307 within the requested budget. That at about a 5% increase. That was year 2, and we're going to be in year 3 of the 5%. A couple items of note. We still have about $55,000 that have not been spent yet in regards to maintenance and repair of the seawall. I've talked with Mr. Delmage, Park Supervisor, about looking into, they are working with a firm, Hubble, Roth & Clark, in regards to an assessment of the marina, whether that's, are those dollars that we can use right now for some temporary repairs? And then also, what are we going to look at for long-term down the road? If there's a complete repair of the marina. What you'll also take a look is that this was, quite unexpected, obviously due to COVID-19, the boat slip refund. Also with the actual, I forget which pier it was, but electrical service. I believe there was still some issue. Thank you. All right. Pier 4, that there were still some electrical issues there. And so we did have to do quite a bit of refunds, within that area. We did I think this was last year, we did move $100,000 in wages and fringes. They were moved to Park and Rec that were within the Marina Fund. And, actually, it was in June of 19. I have my notes here. We had a deficit of about $71,000 within that Marina Fund, and council authorized that transfer to offset that deficit. Other than that, it's, pretty similar, not too much of a change. Really, it's kind of a waiting game right now to see with Hubble, Roth, and Clark and see what they come back with. And then depending upon what their assessment says, do we need to get a second opinion? Because this is a humongous investment in something that has had, we've had some deferred maintenance over the years. And obviously, it's helping us right now with the water levels not rising, but still, we're going to have to address this sooner rather than later. And, if it's not this year, could be another 2 years from now, we're going to have high water levels. I know Chad and Chris are always looking into the water levels. I forget, Army Corps of Engineers. And so they're also working closely with the Marina Subcommittee in regards to their ideas on that. So with that said, that's all I've got. Mayor Denner, looks like you got a question.
I just wanted to make a comment about water levels. This is something that I track pretty carefully because I've got some waterfront property that has been under stress, much like our marina was last year. And you pointed out that the water levels are projected to be lower this year. The water levels in the Great Lakes tend to run in long cycles. And I'm not going to get into all the technical bits, but once it starts into a down cycle, we have many years of down cycle before it comes back up. But with the impact just for long-term planning, though, the projections from the scientists are saying that one of the side effects of climate change is that our highs are going to be higher and our lows are going to be lower in terms of water levels. So during the next decade, while the water levels are going to be manageable in terms of going down or staying down a little bit, I just use that loosely, a decade, but over the next several years at least, is a good time to really look hard at long-term solutions so that the next time that they come up and potentially even higher than they were last year, which could be 15 years from now. But I would say that I appreciate the fact that the city and city administration and the Rec Commission is working with Hubble, Roth, and Clark on long-term planning. And I would encourage that to be followed through on as the information comes available. It's going to be a difficult project for the city because of the amount of capital that will be required, and coming up with a way to be able to finance that will be a challenge. But I think with the water levels going down, it's actually a good time to try to address that. And since I won't be around after November, I wanted to get that speech in.
Councilmember Reed.
This is really more of a generic statement about the budget in general. So if someone else still wanted to talk about the marina, I'll defer. If not, then thank you, City Manager Seisland and your team for putting the budget together for us. This is a lot of work. I know you put a lot of time into this and I appreciate it. But just adding to my earlier comments about establishing a fund policy and a fund spending policy when we would dip into funds, and now that you have your feet wet with 2 budget cycles, I'd like to also include in our budgeting process some long range planning that piggybacks on what the mayor just said about the marina. I'd like to have that, let's look ahead 3 and 5 years about what what maintenance the city needs, what's on the horizon. And then on a more sort of micro level, just as we all look at our family budgets, or if we run businesses, or do any budgeting within our institutions, we don't just do the budget once a year and then forget about it. We have like a budget execution and monitoring. So I would like to incorporate that in city council, that we would get at least quarterly, if not monthly, position statements, so we know like what we budgeted, what, where we are year to date. If there's a variance, an explanation, maybe it's a one-time payment. So, and we see that in the budget you've given us, we haven't hit our budgeted items because we have one big payment left in this budget cycle. So it would be helpful for the council and for the residents to know where we are within our budget on a regular basis, so that we're not, spending a lot of hours once a year looking at these dollars and how we're going to spend them. Because really, truthfully, setting the budget is the most important thing we do as a council, and it's a policy document. It's not just spending dollars, but it's how we are as a council and as a city saying, these are our values, this is how we're spending our dollars. So I'd like a little bit more just, it's not so much oversight, but just that we know where we are within our budget. And when we get to this discussion in May, we have a pretty good idea of where we are in the last year. So, but thank you for the tremendous work you put in. I do really appreciate the level of detail you've given us last year, and this year I would say is even better. So thank you so much to you and to the finance clerk and all the department heads.
Thank you. And yeah, it's definitely, I couldn't have done this without Jane and the team. So thank you. Councilmember McConnell.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't echo those sentiments. So thank you to you and the team for all the hard work, especially as a newbie. Really appreciate it. I wanted to just say a couple things that I've mentioned to you in the past. I would love to see an opportunity for a little more public engagement around the budget. I think I mentioned, maybe we could do a session that is more geared toward just that, so that they have a better understanding, but also can weigh in more. So it could be doing a couple sessions out in the community, whatever the form that takes, but I think it would be helpful to have more of a two-way conversation as we figure out the priorities, because it's their priorities, right? And the second thing is similarly on the 1.1 federal dollars, as Councilmember Reed talks about, MML gave some guidance on this issue. And one of the things that they stressed was having strong community engagement about what they'd like to see done with those dollars. So I just wanted to raise that as well. I mean, obviously you've heard, similar to Councilmember Fluid, certainly the lead pipe replacement and the grants for the businesses, I share those same sentiments, but I think it would be good to get some resident input too, in terms of what their priorities are. So, thanks again.
Thank you. Councilmember Hodges.
Thank you, Mr. Seisland. One thing I neglected to mention earlier is the importance. You really can't overemphasize the concern we need to have with unfunded liabilities going forward for the coming years. Communities that are able to manage those well, that is going to be the distinguishing factor between communities that thrive and communities that languish. So as we look at whether or not to move that DPW expense, I think it is a very important factor to consider that we do need to preserve our fund balance in order to be able to manage those liabilities going forward. I think the math that we did suggested with our existing fund balance, we can manage that through about 2025, and thereafter there's a real serious concern about how we fund those liabilities. So I want to make sure that that's made very clear, and that we understand that that 3 to 5 year view rather than just the current year view. And then just to thank you, both you and Finance Director Blayhut again for your competency in managing the budgeting process. You clearly have a command on the needs and requirements, and you have the capacity to construct a budgeting tool that really works. And I know for me, it's not my job to do the deep dive, right? And the only reason I feel comfortable not doing that is because we have the acumen that is necessary for good financial management. So, and the questions again that I just so the rest of the team knows as well, wearing that council member for finance hat, I thought it was important to inspire that critical thinking by asking you all the right questions. Are we in compliance with all contractual obligations and all state and federal laws and requirements? Have the resources been assigned in a way that enables fulfillment of goals and objectives and that prioritizes those unfunded liabilities? Are we audit friendly? Have we been austere and resourceful, especially in a deficit year? Are we acting in a prudent fashion that ensures a solid municipal bond rating, which is an important measure of financial health? And are we competing effectively with peer communities and striving for best practices? And then on the soft side, one of the questions was, can we have the best possible binder cover? And Jane really pulled it out on that one. You all don't know, but we had to hold up several different options and decide which one worked the best. And I hope you all really like it. So thank you to the staff team for tolerating my questions so that I can do my fiduciary responsibility. And hopefully everybody at the table can see the evidence of a favorable response to each of those questions and that there are solutions to them woven into the document. Thank you.
Okay, well, we've got a couple more. I'm going to start to try to move us towards adjournment here, but I think we've got a couple more to go. Who's keeping track?
Robson and then Fluid.
Okay.
Go ahead, Council Member Fluid.
Oh, okay, thank you. I don't want to give a long-winded thank you because I'm sure everybody is saying thank you, but I do appreciate, actually, I don't appreciate the amount of work that went into this. I don't know, but I know it was a lot, and I appreciate that. I did want to point out, following up on what Councilmember Reed said about getting regular updates. One thing I've been in touch with the city manager about is on a smaller scale, doing that with the DDA and the TIFA when they have meetings, giving actual financial updates as to what they've spent so far, where their money has gone, how projects are developing. I was looking at, their monthly expenditures are online on the city website, but I was looking at some of those and kind of trying to figure out how those funds were being spent. And so I asked the city manager about that, and he indicated that he would be willing in future meetings to kind of give them a higher level of detail for TIFA and DDA as to how their spending was going. So I just wanted to mention that in accordance with what Councilmember Reed was saying about maybe formally doing that as well on a quarterly basis or whatever we determine would be best. But I do appreciate all of this work. I did forget, I had one question about the marina, if I could just go back to that really quickly, and that was about the OPEB expense of $10,000. I just wanted to ask, that's probably a question for the finance director, because I didn't realize we could pay OPEB out of the marina fund. And so I just wanted to ask for clarification on that.
Hi, yes. Last year you asked that I take that expense out, and I did. And since there are retirees from the marina that have retiree health care, that's what the OPEB expense is, to help offset the unfunded liability in OPEB. So that's why it's put back in there. For the retirees that retired that worked in the marina. You're welcome.
Okay.
Councilmember Robson.
I'd like to echo too, Nick, this was a great presentation on your part and your staff. I'm very, very impressed. At the beginning of your presentation tonight, you talked about the MERS pension increases and the possibility of a staff reduction by attrition. I'm confident, and I hope that you will include a discussion with council if it comes to that point. terms of staff reduction.
Absolutely. And thank you for that. Councilmember Raylan, I think you're left.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. This was a great presentation here. Thanks to Jane and all the other department heads. You guys did a great job. As Councilmember Reed stated, this is probably the most important thing we do. I'd also like to add some kind of long-term outlook planning amongst all of us in future, and we can discuss that at future council meetings, as well as some resident engagement. What you presented to us may be able to be presented in some manner to our residents to let them know where money is going, and maybe a PowerPoint slide or something like that. And I can discuss that offline with some ideas I have. But I think it'd be really beneficial to our residents to understand what our budget is going forward, where we spent money previously, where it is now. I know they can look online, but that takes a dedicated resident to dive into that and look at all the line items. If we can make it a more fun, easy popping presentation, just a couple of PowerPoint slides to say, hey, this is where our money's going here. This is what department's going here. And then if you want to dive in, here's the full report. That's all it is. It's got to feel like a final project being completed. So congrats on that. And again, I just want to say thank you. It was impressive. Appreciate it.
Okay, I think everybody's had a chance here at the end, and so I'm going to start to move towards adjournment. Before I do that, I want to remind everybody that Monday, you all know this, of course, but Monday is the day that we are tasked with approving a budget for this future fiscal year, and so hopefully we can do so efficiently. Also, to remind you that takes the form of a number of. First of all, it's done in a budget hearing. So we will open a hearing and then and do it in the form of a budget hearing with public comment at the beginning of that segment of the meeting, just related to the budget. And then we'll go through the resolutions and adopt a budget as amended, which includes adopting the millage rates as they were described here. And there are a couple of other routine things that we always do as well, which is to take essentially delinquent fees and allocate those to property tax bills. And most of you will remember doing that, but I wanted to comment it for those that may not recall doing that, because it's a long list and it is confusing the first time you see it. It turns out a lot of residents just let some of their routine bills go to their property taxes at the end of the year. So that's what we'll see on Monday. So I look forward to an efficient meeting on Monday. I think this was a very productive discussion, and I appreciate everybody participating. And I clearly do appreciate the administration's efforts. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Support?
Or
I'm going to do something different. All in favor? Aye.
Hi.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
thanks.
Night.